Husband was in shock when he found out what I had hidden inside the gift he never appreciated. I thought I knew the man I married. I thought we had a life built on trust. But one shocking discovery changed everything. My husband thought he could betray me and get away with it. He had no idea I was about to turn the tables in a way he never saw coming. What did I do? How did I uncover his lies? And most importantly, how did I destroy his life before he could destroy mine? Stay right here, because this revenge is cold, calculated, and absolutely unforgettable. The golden morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Lexington Cafe, casting soft patterns over the polished mahogany tables. The scent of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the warm notes of vanilla and cinnamon, wrapping around me like a deceptive kind of comfort. I sat by the corner window, my fingers curled around a porcelain coffee cup, absently stirring the dark liquid inside. The rhythmic clinking of the spoon against the ceramic was the only steady thing in my world right now. Around me, life went on. Baristas called out names. The espresso machine hissed and steamed, and business professionals murmured about stock trends and upcoming deals. But I heard none of it. My pulse thrummed in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the waking city. I was waiting. My phone lay face up on the table, the numbers on the screen taunting me. 8:42 a.m. Late. Again. I exhaled slowly, forcing my expression to remain neutral. It wasn't the lateness itself that bothered me, it was what it meant. What it confirmed? Daniel had never been great with time, but lately his delays had taken on a different weight. A kind of dismissiveness, a quiet unraveling of all the little things that used to hold us together. This morning, though, it wasn't just another oversight. Today, his tardiness carried the weight of the inevitable. The brass bell above the cafe door chimed, and I felt it before I saw it, the shift in the air, the almost imperceptible ripple of tension as my body registered his presence. I looked up. There he was. Daniel stepped inside, scanning the cafe with practiced ease before his hazel eyes locked onto mine. He hesitated just a beat too long before making his way over. That hesitation told me everything. He knew, somewhere deep down, beneath whatever lies he'd rehearsed in the mirror this morning, he knew. He slid into the seat across from me with an easy smile, the kind that had once made my stomach flip. Now, it only made my stomach twist. Morning, he said, like this was just another day. I studied him, taking in the crisp navy blue blazer, the perfectly knotted tie, the subtle shadow of stubble lining his jaw. The way he adjusted his watch, expensive, gifted by me on our last anniversary, as if he had somewhere better to be. The way his fingers tapped against the table, betraying the slightest tremor beneath his calm exterior. "You're late," I said, my voice quiet but firm. He smirked, leaning back like he owned the moment. Yeah, traffic was a nightmare. The lie sat between us like a physical thing, heavy, unavoidable. I let it linger, let him squirm just a little, before I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. His eyes flickered to it, his smirk faltering for just a second. "What's that?" I slid it across the table, tapping the edge once. "Open it." He hesitated, then sighed, as if indulging me, as if this was some pointless inconvenience rather than the moment his carefully crafted world was about to come crashing down. He tore open the top with casual indifference, but as he pulled out the contents, I watched the shift happen in real time. The muscle in his jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the papers a little too hard. His breathing changed, just slightly. His eyes darted across the printed bank statements, the receipts, the confirmation email from the five-star resort in the Bahamas. And then, just like that, the blood drained from his face. I leaned forward, lowering my voice, making sure only he could hear me. Care to explain? His mouth opened, then closed. He shuffled through the papers like he might find an escape route hidden between the lines. "Anna, listen. You told me you were swamped at work." I cut in, my tone steady, controlled. "Too busy for date nights, too busy for weekends together, but not too busy for this?" I tapped a perfectly manicured finger against the reservation details. And you were kind enough to use our joint credit card to pay for it. Silence. A single bead of sweat formed at his temple, betraying the unraveling happening beneath his polished exterior. For the first time in our 5-year relationship, I watched Daniel scramble for words. It was almost amusing, almost. He finally exhaled, setting the papers down with exaggerated care. It's not what you think. I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Really? Because it looks a hell of a lot like you've been planning a tropical getaway without me. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic I had learned to recognize. It's just a business trip. With an oceanfront suite, my voice was sharp, cutting through his weak excuse. You expect me to believe that? He hesitated a second too long, and that was all I needed. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Tell me the truth, Daniel. His eyes flicked toward the exit, like a man contemplating a run for it. Look, Anna, it's complicated, he said, his voice quieter now. I was going to tell you. Oh, were you? My sarcasm was sharp enough to cut glass. He sighed again, reaching for his coffee, but his hands were trembling slightly. It's not serious. I needed some space. The words hit me like a slap. Space, I repeated, as if testing the taste of it. From what? Me, Daniel exhaled, looking anywhere but at me. I don't know, Anna. I feel like we've been stuck in this routine. Like we lost something. I stared at him, my mind racing. I had been the one holding everything together. I had been the one making sacrifices, being understanding, waiting up late for him to come home from work meetings. And now he was talking about needing space. Something inside me shifted. The pain, the confusion, they were still there. But rising above them, stronger than anything else, was clarity. I reached for my bag, standing up with deliberate ease. You know what, Daniel? He looked up at me, wary now. You can have all the space you want. And with that, I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving him sitting there, still holding the evidence of his own betrayal. As the cold morning air hit me, something inside me settled. This wasn't heartbreak. It was freedom. And I was just getting started. The cold morning air wrapped around me as I stepped out of the cafe, my heels clicking against the sidewalk, each step deliberate, each breath measured. My pulse was still pounding, my mind racing, but I refused to let it show. I wouldn't give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not here, not now. I reached my car, slid into the driver's seat, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The cafe, the people inside, the weight of Daniel's lies, it all blurred together in the rearview mirror. As I pulled onto the road, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Daniel. I let it ring, then again, and again, and again. By the time I hit the first red light, I glanced down at the screen. 10 missed calls. Then, the messages poured in. Daniel, Anna, come back. Let's talk. Daniel, I didn't mean for it to come out like that. Daniel, this isn't what you think. Daniel, please answer me, I scoffed. This isn't what you think. The words rolled through my mind over and over like an old, broken record. What exactly was I supposed to think? That a fully paid luxury vacation was a work trip? That the ocean view suite wasn't meant for someone else? No. I knew exactly what this was, and now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. As I pulled up to a red light, my fingers drummed against the steering wheel, my mind running 100 miles an hour. I could ignore him, walk away, let him think he had won this round. But something about the way he had looked at me, panicked, scrambling, desperate, told me that he wasn't just lying. He was hiding something. And if Daniel thought he could gaslight me into believing some half-baked excuse, then he didn't know me at all. I wasn't walking away. Not yet. Instead of heading toward my apartment, I made a sharp right toward Daniel's office. The parking lot of Harrington and Blake Consulting was nearly empty when I arrived. Most of the executives were out traveling for meetings, and Daniel usually worked late when he wasn't planning secret vacations, that was. I stepped inside, the cool marble of the lobby floor echoing beneath my heels. The receptionist, Maggie, looked up from her screen and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, Miss Caldwell." Daniel's still in his office. "Would you like me to let him know you're here?" I returned her smile but shook my head. "That's okay, Maggie. I just need to grab something from his desk. He won't mind." She nodded, clearly unbothered, and returned to whatever she had been working on. Perfect. I made my way down the hallway, passing the rows of offices, my pulse quickening. I had been in Daniel's office countless times before. The glass-walled space, the sleek black furniture, it was familiar territory. But tonight, I wasn't here as his wife. I was here as his reckoning. The office door was cracked open. I pushed it gently, stepping inside. The scent of his cologne still lingered in the air. His desk was immaculate, as always, the books perfectly aligned, the expensive Mont Blanc pen resting in its holder. But I wasn't interested in his order. I was looking for his secrets. I walked around the desk, pulling open drawers with precise movements. Nothing. Second drawer. Still nothing. Then I spotted it, his laptop, screen dark, resting against the side of his chair. I grabbed it, pressing the power button. The screen flickered to life, the login prompt appearing. I frowned. Daniel was meticulous. He wouldn't use something obvious for his password, but he had always underestimated me when it came to paying attention. I typed in his mother's birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary date. Still wrong. My jaw tightened. Then I remembered something, a number he used for everything. His gym locker, his phone pin, even the stupid security code for our apartment. 081219. The screen unlocked. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the files. He had folders labeled client reports and financials, but it was the one at the very bottom that made my stomach twist. Private. My fingers hovered over the trackpad for half a second before I clicked it. The folder opened. Inside, dozens of PDFs, images, and one video file. My hands trembled as I opened the first document. It was an invoice. From the Bahamas resort, paid in full, for 2 guests. My heart pounded. Next file, an email exchange. "Daniel, can't wait for next weekend. Hope you like surprises. Unknown, you always know how to spoil me. Daniel, anything for you, babe. She won't suspect a thing." My blood ran cold. I scrolled further, my fingers moving on autopilot. More messages, more proof, and then the video file. My stomach twisted as I clicked play. The footage was grainy, shaky, as if filmed in a hurry. But I recognized his voice instantly. Daniel, laughing, and then her. A woman, younger, long brunette hair, stepping into the frame. They were on a balcony, the ocean stretching behind them. The timestamp in the corner of the screen? 3 weeks ago. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering so hard it drowned out the quiet hum of the office. I had expected cheating, expected lies, but this? He had been parading his replacement like it was a goddamn vacation. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I could confront him, show up at his apartment, throw the evidence in his face. But no, that was too easy. Daniel wanted to play games? Fine. I was about to show him how it's really done. With calculated movements, I slid the laptop back where I found it, smoothed down my dress, and walked toward the door. Maggie gave me a polite nod as I left the building, completely unaware that my entire world had just shifted. The night air was colder now, but I barely noticed. My plan was forming, sharp and deadly. Daniel thought he had everything under control. He thought I would cry. But he had no idea that I was about to make him the one who would lose everything. I drove home, my mind a hurricane of thoughts, my body thrumming with adrenaline. My phone buzzed again. Daniel, again. I let it ring, a bitter smile curling on my lips. He had no idea that I knew, that the countdown to his downfall had already begun. He had betrayed me, lied to me, made a fool of me. But he had also underestimated me. And that was the biggest mistake of all. I walked into my apartment, closing the door behind me. The silence was deafening. The weight of what I had discovered settled over me, heavy but not suffocating. No, this wasn't fear. This was clarity. This was power. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen counter, and exhaled slowly. I had a lot of work to do. Daniel thought he was the only one playing the game. But what he didn't realize was that I had just made my first move, and I wasn't playing to lose. I had the proof. I had the upper hand, but Daniel still thought he could manipulate his way out of it. He had no idea that I wasn't just walking away. I was about to take everything from him. What would you do in my place? Would you expose him immediately and watch his world crumble, comment 1-1? Or would you wait, let him think he was safe, and then strike when he least expected comment 2-2? Let me know, because trust me, things are about to explode. The night stretched long and restless, but sleep never came. My mind was too sharp, too alive, running through every possible move like a chessboard laid out in front of me. Daniel thought he could play me, thought he could cheat, manipulate, and lie without consequence. He had no idea that I had already started dismantling him piece by piece. By the time the sun crept over the horizon, painting the city in soft amber hues, I had made my decision. I wasn't just going to leave him, I was going to ruin him. I sat at the kitchen counter, my laptop open in front of me, the glow of the screen casting eerie shadows across the room. A half-empty cup of coffee sat beside me, untouched. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I pulled up our bank accounts, our joint accounts, the ones Daniel so confidently used, believing I was too oblivious to check. He had spent thousands on her. The flights, the hotel, the dinners, the jewelry. A quick glance at the transactions told me everything I needed to know. He didn't even try to hide it. I smirked, shaking my head. That was his arrogance. His fatal flaw. I clicked through the settings, selecting the freeze account option. A confirmation window popped up. Are you sure you want to proceed? I let out a slow breath, my heartbeat steady, controlled. Yes. A final click, and it was done. Daniel was about to find out what it felt like to have everything ripped away. But I wasn't done. Next, I pulled up our travel accounts. He must have assumed I never paid attention to the details, because all the information was their flight reservations, hotel bookings, even the private car service scheduled to pick them up from the airport. How thoughtful. One click. Canceled. The refund? Transferred directly into my personal account. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. Daniel thought he was about to have the perfect escape, a luxury getaway with his mistress, basking in the sun, while I sat at home believing his lies. Not anymore. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number for our bank. A cheerful representative answered after 2 rings. Good morning. Thank you for calling Westwood Financial. How can I assist you today? I softened my voice, slipping into the role of a concerned, responsible wife. Hi, I'd like to report a lost card, I said sweetly. It's our joint account. I just noticed some unusual charges, and I want to make sure our finances are secure. Of course, ma'am, she replied, professional and eager to assist. Would you like me to issue a replacement card? I let out a small sigh, just enough to sound believable. Actually, I'd prefer to freeze the account indefinitely, just until I get everything sorted out with my husband. He's been so forgetful lately. I wouldn't be surprised if he lost his wallet again. The rep chuckled politely. I understand. I can take care of that for you right now. I thanked her, hung up, and set my phone down with a satisfied sigh. Daniel was going to wake up to a financial nightmare. Still, I knew men like him. This wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed to hit him where it really hurt. I switched tabs, pulling up my email. I had already compiled everything I needed: the fraudulent expenses, the shady reimbursements, the personal charges hidden under company expenses. All it took was a simple, anonymous message to his company's ethics committee. I attached the files, triple-checking every detail, ensuring that once they opened this email, there would be no way for him to talk his way out of it. Subject: urgent, possible ethics violation. Financial misconduct to whom it may concern. I am reaching out anonymously to bring a serious issue to your attention. One of your employees, Daniel Caldwell, has been misusing company funds for personal expenses, including unauthorized travel and leisure purchases. Attached are the relevant documents. I trust that you will investigate accordingly. Best, a concerned party. One stared at the email for a long moment. My finger hovered over the send button. A part of me hesitated, not out of guilt, but out of realization. This was it. This was the moment I decided how this ended. If I sent this email, there was no coming back, no fixing it, no forgiving. I clicked send. The message disappeared into cyberspace, heading straight toward the people who held Daniel's career in their hands. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The weight that had been pressing against my chest for weeks, months, maybe even years, it was lifting. This was the beginning of the end for Daniel, and I was going to enjoy every second of watching him squirm. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Another desperate attempt to regain control. Daniel, Anna, please, just talk to me. I smirked, tapping my nails against the counter. He had no idea what was coming. I typed my response carefully, deliberately. Anna, fine. Let's talk. Come over tomorrow. A pause. Then, Daniel, thank you, baby. I love you. I stared at the words on the screen, my stomach twisting. Lies. I didn't reply. I had work to do. I barely slept that night, but exhaustion never came. My mind was too sharp, too wired with adrenaline, replaying every detail of the plan I had set in motion. The bank accounts were frozen. His luxurious getaway had been erased, and by now, the email with evidence of his financial misconduct was sitting in the inbox of his company's ethics committee. But I knew Daniel. I knew how he thought, how he operated. He wasn't the type to panic right away. No, first he'd try to regain control, to manipulate the situation in his favor. He'd call, he'd beg, he'd make promises he had no intention of keeping. And when that didn't work, when he realized I wasn't playing along, that's when the desperation would set in. That's when the cracks in his carefully curated world would start to show, and I wanted him to feel every single one of them breaking apart beneath him. The next morning, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the collar of my silk blouse, my movements slow and precise. My reflection stared back at me, calm, collected. This was the moment I needed to be in complete control. Daniel would come over tonight, thinking he still had a chance to spin this in his favor. He had no idea that I was simply setting the stage, letting him walk straight into his own downfall. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, already knowing who it was. Daniel, morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tonight. I rolled my eyes, my lips curling into something between amusement and disgust. He was already trying to pretend like none of this was happening, like we were just another married couple having a rough patch. Classic. I didn't respond. Let him sweat a little longer. Instead, I spent the afternoon finalizing every detail of what came next. I pulled out my laptop and scrolled through my saved files, each one a carefully documented piece of evidence against him. Screenshots of messages, credit card statements, reservations booked under his name, his mistress's name. I had it all. I even had the security footage from our building's lobby footage of him sneaking in at odd hours of the night, looking over his shoulder like the guilty man he was. He always thought he was careful. He wasn't. I compiled everything into one neat folder and uploaded it to a cloud drive with an automatic scheduled email. If anything happened, if he tried anything stupid, the entire file would be sent to multiple contacts: his boss, his parents, even a few of our mutual friends who still believed he was some charming, devoted husband. He would have nowhere to hide. By the time evening rolled around, the apartment was bathed in the warm glow of dimmed lighting. I poured myself a glass of wine, letting the deep red liquid swirl against the glass as I settled onto the couch. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't anxious, I was simply waiting. Then, right on cue, the familiar sound of keys jingling outside the door. A pause. Then, a hesitant knock. I took a slow sip of wine before setting the glass down and standing. My fingers lingered on the doorknob for just a moment before I pulled it open. Daniel stood on the other side, wearing that same disarming smile he always used when he was trying to get his way. He looked good, he always did. Pressed shirt, tailored slacks, just enough scruff to make him look effortlessly put together. But I wasn't fooled by the polished exterior. Not anymore. "Hey, baby," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I missed you." I closed the door behind him, locking it with a soft click. He turned, watching me carefully, like he was trying to gauge my mood, trying to decide which version of himself he needed to be tonight. The apologetic husband? The misunderstood victim? The charming manipulator? I didn't give him the chance to decide. "Drink?" I asked, my voice even, controlled. He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." I walked to the kitchen, taking my time as I poured him a glass of whiskey. I could feel his eyes on me, searching for any sign of weakness, any opening he could use. When I turned back, I handed him the glass and gestured for him to sit. He did, sinking into the couch with the ease of a man who still believed he had the upper hand. "So," he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass, "I know things got a little heated yesterday." I arched a brow, settling into the chair across from him. "Heated?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I messed up, okay? I know how it looks, but I swear, it's not what you think." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Then what is it, Daniel?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think." He set his glass down, leaning forward, his voice dropping into that soft, coaxing tone he always used when he wanted me to believe him. "Anna, I love you. I never meant to hurt you. I was I was in a weird place. Work has been stressful, and I guess I just wanted an escape." I let the silence stretch, let him think he was getting somewhere. Then I reached down, pulled out the envelope I had prepared, and slid it across the table. His jaw tensed. "What's this?" "Open it." His fingers hesitated over the flap before finally pulling out the contents. His breath hitched as he took in the printed messages, the screenshots, the receipts. And then the final piece, the hotel invoice, confirming a stay for 2 under his name. He swallowed hard. "Anna, I know," I cut in, my voice sharp. "No more lies, no more excuses. You're done talking. Now, you listen." His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked down at the papers in his hands, then back at me, realization dawning in his eyes. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "You think you've been in control this whole time, Daniel. You think you're smart, that you can talk your way out of anything. But you made one mistake." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "And what's that?" I smiled, slow and cold. "You underestimated me." Daniel's face had always been easy to read when he was caught off guard. It was the slightest shift, the way his jaw tensed, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the way his fingers curled just a little too tightly around whatever was in his hands. Right now, those hands were gripping the damning evidence I had just handed him, his knuckles turning white as he scanned the pages. He didn't look at me. Not yet. His mind was still working, still scrambling for a way out. I could practically see the gears turning, calculating which lie would be the safest, which version of reality he could spin that I might still believe. He didn't realize yet that those options were gone. When he finally lifted his gaze, his expression was carefully composed, but his voice betrayed him. "Anna, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed, a quiet, humorless sound as I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You know, you keep saying that, but so far you haven't actually told me what it is." His jaw clenched. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, arching a brow. Which part? Booking the trip? Using our money to pay for it? Or was it the affair itself? Daniel exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. It wasn't an affair. It was just, I don't know, a lapse in judgment. A stupid, meaningless thing. I tilted my head. A stupid, meaningless thing that lasted how long, exactly? He didn't answer. I pushed forward, my voice dangerously calm. 3 months? 6? I tapped a finger against the hotel invoice. Because this wasn't the first trip you planned, was it? His silence was answer enough. I let the quiet stretch between us, watching as he fidgeted, tapping his fingers against his knee, shifting in his seat. The man who had walked in here thinking he could charm his way back into my good graces was gone. Now, he was just another liar, another coward waiting for the inevitable fallout of his own actions. Okay, he said finally, setting the papers down with forced composure. I get it. You're pissed. And you have every right to be. But, Anna, I love you. His voice softened, took on that pleading edge he always used when he was trying to manipulate me. You and me, we have history. We have a life together. Are you really willing to throw all of that away over one mistake? Something inside me went cold. Throw it away? I stood slowly, walking to the counter where my glass of wine sat untouched. I picked it up, swirling the deep red liquid before taking a slow sip. When I turned back to face him, my expression was steady, unwavering. You already threw it away? I said simply. His lips parted, but I kept going. You threw it away the moment you decided I wasn't enough. The moment you lied to my face. The moment you made a reservation for 2 in a suite, overlooking the ocean while I was at home, still believing in us. I took another sip, letting the words settle between us. So don't sit there and act like I'm the one ending this, Daniel. You did that all on your own. His nostrils flared. Anna, come on, I'm being what? I cut in sharply. Emotional? Irrational? Do you think I want this? Do you think I enjoy sitting here, spelling it out for you like you're some clueless idiot who doesn't understand the consequences of his own choices? I set the glass down with a sharp clink against the counter. You don't get to gaslight me anymore, Daniel. You don't get to spin this into something it's not. He exhaled heavily, rubbing his temple. I didn't mean for it to happen. I rolled my eyes. God, you really need some new lines. His expression darkened, frustration creeping in now. So what? This is it? You're just going to punish me? Ruin my life because I made a mistake? I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. No, Daniel. I'm not punishing you. I leaned forward slightly, letting my voice drop just enough to make sure he heard every word. I'm holding you accountable. His eyes flickered with something almost like fear, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything sat between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he shifted, reaching for his glass of whiskey, taking a long sip before setting it back down. What do you want? I smiled, slow and calculated. I already have everything I want. He blinked. What the hell does that mean? I reached down, pulling out another envelope, this one thinner than the first. I slid it across the table. That, I said, watching as he hesitated before picking it up, is a copy of our divorce papers. His breath hitched. I already signed them, I said, cutting him off. I had them drawn up weeks ago. You should have known, Daniel. The moment I found out, the moment I saw you for exactly who you are, this marriage was over. His fingers tightened around the papers, his entire body going rigid. You can't be serious. I tilted my head. You think I'd go through all this trouble just to bluff? For the first time since he walked in, I saw realization dawning, the full weight of everything crashing down around him. His shoulders slumped slightly, his lips pressing into a tight line. I won't sign them, he said finally. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, Daniel, you will. And if I don't? I reached for my phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward him. His eyes flicked to the display, and I watched as the color drained from his face. It was a live video feed, His boss, sitting at his desk, reading the email I had sent earlier today. Daniel's jaw tightened. You. I set the phone down, meeting his gaze head on. You're done, Daniel. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. You have no idea what you've just done. I smiled, taking another slow sip of wine. Actually, I said, I know exactly what I've done. Daniel's face was a mask of barely contained rage, his jaw tight, his hands clenched so hard. The divorce papers crinkled beneath his grip. For a man who had spent months, maybe years perfecting the art of deception, he sure wasn't handling the fallout very well. His eyes darted back to my phone, still displaying the live feed of his boss reading the email that had just shattered his carefully constructed reality. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, his mind racing for an exit strategy, a way to regain control. But there was no control left for him. That was the difference between us now. I was the one pulling the strings, and he was just another man learning what it felt like to lose. His voice, when it finally came, was lower, darker. Anna, you need to stop this. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Stop what, exactly? You know damn well what. He gestured toward the phone, toward the divorce papers. You think this is justice? You think ruining my life is going to fix whatever you think I did to you? A laugh bubbled up in my throat, sharp and bitter. Oh, Daniel, whatever I think you did? I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the heat of it spread through my chest before setting the glass down with deliberate precision. Let me make something very clear to you. I know what you did, and I'm not ruining your life. I'm simply letting the truth catch up to you. His nostrils flared as he exhaled, his fingers raking through his hair in frustration. You're acting like I'm some kind of monster, like I did this to hurt you. He let out a humorless chuckle, shaking his head. You know, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with control, with punishing me, we could actually talk about this. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Talk? You want to talk? I shook my head, a slow, disbelieving smile forming on my lips. Daniel, for months you've been sneaking around behind my back, lying straight to my face, using our money to fund some pathetic little fantasy life with another woman. And now that you've been caught, now that there's no way out, now you want to sit down and have a conversation? His jaw tightened. I made a mistake. No, Daniel. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is leaving the stove on. I gestured toward the divorce papers in his hand. This was a series of choices. Every single lie, every single stolen moment, every single excuse you chose this. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could see it in his eyes now, the moment he realized there was no talking his way out of this, no charming his way back into my good graces. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and he hated it. Men like Daniel needed control. They needed to be the ones dictating the terms, the ones setting the rules. And right now, he had nothing. Finally, he exhaled, setting the divorce papers down on the coffee table. His tone softened, a last-ditch effort at manipulation. Anna, you don't have to do this. We can work through this. I still love you. I stared at him for a long moment, taking in every detail, the desperation in his eyes, the slight tremor in his fingers, the way he was clinging to the last shreds of whatever illusion he had left. And then I said the one thing that shattered it completely. I don't love you. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't said out of anger or spite. It was simply the truth. Daniel flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. His mouth opened, then closed again. He had nothing left to say. I stood, reaching for my phone, the live feed still running in the background. You should leave, Daniel. His fingers flexed against his thighs, his breath coming a little too fast. And if I don't? I smiled, slow and controlled. Then I hit send. He frowned. Send what? I turned my phone screen toward him, letting him see the drafted email. It was addressed to his entire company, his parents, his colleagues, anyone who still thought he was the charming, respectable man he pretended to be. Attached were all the receipts, all the proof, every carefully compiled document that showed exactly who he was. You don't want to sign the papers? Fine. But if you make this harder than it needs to be, I make sure everyone knows the truth. Your job, your reputation, your entire image gone. His face paled. You wouldn't. I arched a brow. Wouldn't I? He hesitated, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. He was cornered, and he knew it. Seconds stretched into eternity before he finally exhaled, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He reached for the pen on the coffee table, flipping through the pages of the divorce papers. I watched as he signed his name, each stroke of the pen carrying the weight of his downfall. When he was done, he tossed the pen onto the table and stood, his eyes burning with something I couldn't quite place. You're going to regret this. I didn't even blink. No, Daniel, you are. He turned, stalking toward the door. But before he could leave, I called out one last time. Oh, and Daniel? He paused, his hand on the doorknob but didn't turn around. I picked up my wine glass, letting a small smirk tug at the corner of my lips. Tell her I said hello. His shoulders tensed, his breath catching just for a second, before he wrenched the door open and disappeared into the night. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, staring at the door, listening to the deafening silence that filled the space he once occupied. Then, slowly, I sat back down, taking a long sip of wine, letting the warmth of victory settle in my chest. It was over, and I had won. The silence in my apartment felt different now. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind that had pressed against my chest for months, making me question my own instincts, making me feel like I was the one losing my mind. No, this was lighter, freer, like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for far too long. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table, signed, final. Daniel was gone. I had watched him walk out that door, his ego bruised, his carefully curated life crumbling beneath him. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had control again. Real control. Not the illusion of it. Not the kind that came from making compromises and keeping the peace just to avoid conflict. This was different. This was power. I poured myself another glass of wine, letting the rich, bold taste linger on my tongue as I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the dark skyline. My phone was on the counter, face down, silent. I hadn't heard from Daniel since he left, and part of me wondered if he had finally accepted his fate. If he had finally realized that I wasn't the same woman he had so easily manipulated. Maybe he'd pack his things, disappear, start over somewhere else with whatever was left of his pride. Maybe he'd pretend none of this had happened, rewrite the story in his mind to make himself the victim. Maybe. But deep down, I knew better. Men like Daniel didn't just walk away. The first message came in just after midnight. Daniel, I hope you're happy. I stared at the screen, my heart steady, my fingers resting against the cool glass. I didn't respond. Another message. Daniel, you think you've won? A slow exhale left my lips. There it was. That shift. The moment when he realized he had lost control, and instead of accepting it, he was looking for a way to take it back. I had seen it before. In his arguments, in the way he handled disappointment, in the way he talked about people who had wronged him. Daniel wasn't just a liar. He was a man who believed he was entitled to always come out on top. And when he didn't, he made sure no one else did either. Another message. This one different. Daniel, I know where you are. A chill crawled down my spine. Not fear, just the awareness that this wasn't over. Not yet. I turned the phone over, pressing my fingers against my temples, forcing my thoughts to stay rational. This was a game to him, a last-ditch effort to make me doubt myself, to make me question whether I had truly won. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to see if he could still get under my skin. And I refused to give him that satisfaction. I went to bed without responding, but sleep never came. Every creak in the apartment, every distant car horn outside, every shift in the shadows made my body tense. I wasn't afraid of Daniel. But I knew what men like him were capable of when they felt cornered. By morning, I had 30 missed calls. The last voicemail left just after dawn was different. His voice was calmer, controlled, too controlled. Anna, I just want to talk. Just hear me out, okay? You don't have to respond. Just listen. You don't get to decide how this ends. You don't get to rewrite history and act like I was the villain. I made mistakes, sure. But you're no saint either. You think you're better than me? You think you're untouchable now just because you had your little revenge? You have no idea what you've started. A pause. A slow, deliberate inhale. Then, this isn't over. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand. My breath slow, measured. My mind was clear now. Focused. He wasn't making empty threats. This wasn't just desperation. This was a man who had lost everything and wasn't willing to go down quietly. I had humiliated him. I had taken his money, his career, his reputation, his sense of control, and now I was the one with the upper hand. But Daniel wasn't the type to accept defeat. I deleted the voicemail, grabbed my jacket, and stepped out into the cold morning air. The city was already awake, the streets buzzing with life, but I felt completely still. I needed a plan, a strategy. I had spent months preparing for the moment I walked away, but I hadn't considered what would happen if Daniel refused to let me. My feet carried me to the one place I knew I'd find clarity. Lena's apartment. She answered on the second knock, her eyes widening the moment she saw my face. Jesus, Anna, what? I pushed past her, stepping inside. The warmth of her apartment wrapped around me, but I barely felt it. He's not done, I said, my voice steady, my hands clenched at my sides. Lena shut the door, locking it before turning to face me fully. What happened? I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the voicemail before pressing play. The room filled with Daniel's voice, low and calculated. By the time it ended, Lena's expression had darkened. She exhaled sharply. That's not a man who's walking away. No, I murmured. It's not. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes scanning my face, searching for any sign of fear. She wouldn't find it. Not anymore. Then she nodded. Okay, she said, her voice firm, decisive. Then we end this. For good. I sat down on her couch, my mind already calculating my next move. Daniel thought he was the one pulling the strings. He had no idea that I had just cut them all. Lena didn't waste time. The moment I finished explaining, she was already moving, pacing her apartment with a determination that told me she had been expecting this. Maybe not this exact escalation, but she knew Daniel wouldn't just disappear quietly. She stopped in front of me, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. You need to go to the police, she said finally. I sighed, rubbing my temple. And tell them what, Lena? That my ex-husband is sending me vague, threatening messages? That he knows where I am? They'll pat me on the back, tell me to get a restraining order. And then what? Wait for him to actually do something before they take it seriously? She didn't argue, because she knew I was right. I had seen this before, read enough stories, lived through enough moments where Daniel had brushed up against a line but never quite crossed it. Not in a way the law would actually care about. And I wasn't about to sit around, waiting for the system to fail me. I needed to be ahead of him. Lena exhaled sharply, her fingers tapping against her elbow as she thought. Okay, fine. So what's the plan? I ran a hand through my hair, my mind already calculating the next step. First, I need to make sure I'm not being watched. Her brow furrowed. You think he's actually following you? I hesitated. I don't know, but I know how Daniel thinks. He's not the type to get his hands dirty directly. Not yet. He'll send messages, make me question myself, maybe even show up in places I don't expect him to. He wants me to feel trapped, but he also doesn't want to get caught. He's too smart for that. Lena nodded, already grabbing her keys from the counter. Then let's find out. I blinked. What? She shrugged. We take a drive. See if anyone follows us. If he's watching, we'll know soon enough. I stared at her for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's go. We left her apartment together, moving quickly but not too quickly, careful not to look over our shoulders too much. I climbed into the passenger seat as Lena pulled out onto the street, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. We drove in silence for a while, taking turns at random, doubling back on streets, switching lanes more often than necessary. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to push back the paranoia that wanted to settle into my bones. I kept my eyes on the side mirrors, scanning for anything that felt off. And then I saw it. A dark SUV, 2 cars behind us. Lena must have seen it at the same time because her fingers tightened around the wheel. Third time that car's shown up, she murmured. My stomach twisted. You think it's him? She shook her head. Too risky. If he's watching, he wouldn't do it himself. But he could have sent someone. I swallowed hard. Daniel had connections. Not the kind that made him dangerous in the traditional sense. He wasn't some criminal mastermind, but he knew people. Lawyers, business associates, people who owed him favors. People who wouldn't think twice about doing him a small favor if he spun it the right way. I glanced at Lena. Lose them. She didn't hesitate. She took the next turn hard, cutting through an intersection just as the light turned yellow. The SUV hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. By the time they decided to follow, Lena had already merged onto another road, weaving through traffic with practiced ease. She was good. I had almost forgotten that. Lena had always been the reckless one between us, the one who knew how to slip through a crowd unnoticed, how to get out of situations most people would panic in. Another turn, another sharp merge. By the time we reached the next stoplight, the SUV was gone. Lena let out a slow breath, rolling her shoulders like she was shaking off the tension. That was fun. I shot her a look. Glad one of us is enjoying this, she smirked, then turned serious. So now we know. He's watching. I nodded, my grip on my phone tightening, which means he's not done yet. We drove back in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I knew what had to happen next. I had been prepared for this, hadn't I? I had thought through every scenario, every move Daniel might make. But now that it was real, now that I knew for sure he was keeping tabs on me, I felt something different settle into my chest. Not fear. Not quite. It was something sharper. Something colder. Lena parked in front of her apartment, turning to face me fully. What do you want to do? I inhaled deeply. I need to disappear for a while. Her eyes widened. Anna, I don't mean forever, I said quickly. Just long enough to make him slip up. Right now, he thinks he's in control. He thinks he has the upper hand because he knows where I am, what I'm doing. If I vanish, if I make him wonder, he'll get desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. Lena studied me carefully, then nodded. All right, where do you want to go? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through options. I had already considered this before, had a handful of places I could disappear to if things got bad. A friend's cabin upstate, a short-term rental under an alias, a hotel where I could pay in cash. I'll figure it out, I murmured. But I need to move fast. Lena grabbed my wrist gently. You're not doing this alone. I met her gaze, something tight and warm settling in my chest. I know. And I did. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone in this. But Daniel didn't know that, and that was going to be his first mistake. I drove in silence, the city fading behind me as the road stretched long and empty ahead. The lights, the noise, the suffocating presence of Daniel's shadow, it all shrank in the rearview mirror, and with every mile, I felt myself coming back to life. The tension in my shoulders eased, my grip on the wheel relaxed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. Lena had wanted to come with me. She had argued, insisted, but I needed to do this alone. Not because I didn't trust her, I did. She was the only person I truly did. But this was my fight, my final move. Daniel had spent years pulling me into his game, making me play by his rules, trapping me in his twisted version of reality. But now I was the one setting the board. and he had no idea that checkmate was already inevitable. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it, secluded, nestled deep in the woods, the kind of place where the world couldn't find you unless you wanted it to. I had been here once before, years ago, when life had felt overwhelming in a different way. Back then, I had come here to clear my head, to reset. Now, I was here to end things. I parked the car, stepping out into the crisp night air. The silence was different here, no city hum, no distant horns or murmured conversations. Just the wind rustling through the trees, the soft creak of the wooden steps as I made my way inside. I didn't turn on the lights. I moved through the darkness with ease, locking the doors, pulling the curtains shut. I had planned for this. A burner phone sat on the kitchen counter, a fresh SIM card already inserted. My laptop, secured with encrypted files, was ready. Every detail had been thought out, every contingency prepared for. Daniel had always been 2 steps ahead of me before, not this time. I powered on the laptop, my fingers moving with precision as I accessed the files I had been collecting. Bank statements, emails, hidden transactions, every piece of evidence that not only exposed his affair, but revealed the extent of his financial fraud. He hadn't just been reckless with his marriage, he had been reckless with his career. And now I had the proof to make sure he never recovered. My finger hovered over the send button. One click, and Daniel's carefully constructed life would collapse. A part of me wondered what he was doing right now. Was he pacing his apartment, his phone clutched in his hand, wondering where I had gone? Was he still trying to convince himself that he could fix this? Or had the reality finally sunk in that he had lost, that there was no coming back from this? The thought almost made me smile. Almost. I clicked send. The email shot off into cyberspace, delivered straight to his company's legal department, his boss, the ethics board. There would be no hiding from this. No carefully crafted lies. No charming apologies that could smooth this over. By morning, Daniel wouldn't just be dealing with a broken marriage, he'd be facing real consequences. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. It was done. And yet, as I stared at the screen, waiting for the weight to lift, something gnawed at the edges of my mind. This wasn't over. Not yet. Daniel's last message still echoed in my head. This isn't over. A warning, a promise. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, my burner phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice before answering. I didn't speak, just listened. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, his voice. I knew you wouldn't be able to let it go. A slow exhale left my lips. Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. Daniel chuckled, low and humorless. Running, Anna? That's not like you. I'm not running, I said evenly. I'm finishing what you started. Silence. Then, the sound of him shifting, like he was adjusting his grip on the phone. You think you've won? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. I don't think, Daniel. I know. A pause. Longer this time. Then, his voice dropped lower. Where are you? I tilted my head, eyes flicking to the window, to the darkness beyond. Wouldn't you like to know? He let out a slow breath, the sound tinged with frustration. You're making a mistake. No, Daniel, I murmured. I made the mistake of trusting you. Now, I'm correcting it. Another beat of silence. Then, a quiet laugh. You really think this ends with an email? With a few frozen accounts? You've embarrassed me, sure. You've put me in a bad spot. But I always come back, Anna. Always. A flicker of something dark passed through me, but I didn't let it take root. I kept my voice calm, steady. Not this time, he scoffed. And what makes you so sure? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my fingers tapping lightly against the wood. Because I know something you don't. He waited. I let the silence stretch, let the tension settle between us like a loaded gun. Then, I whispered, you're not the only one who knows how to play dirty. He inhaled sharply, just a fraction of a second too late, and that's when I knew I had him. I ended the call before he could respond. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but inside, I was still, calm. I had spent so long living in Daniel's world, reacting to his moves, second-guessing my own instincts. But now I was free, and he knew it. By morning, he'd wake up to the full extent of what I had done, his career in ruins, his accounts drained, his reputation shredded. And when he tried to come after me because I knew he would, I'd be 10 steps ahead. I stood, stretching, rolling the tension from my shoulders. The game was over, and I had won. I climbed into bed, pulling the blankets over me, letting my body sink into the mattress. Sleep came easily this time, deep, dreamless, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was free. Justice was served. The truth came out. And Daniel, he lost everything. But was it enough? Did he get what he truly deserved? Or should I have gone even further? Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And if you love a good revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because, trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Trust is a dangerous thing when given to the wrong person. I learned that the hard way. Daniel thought he could manipulate, lie, and control me forever, but he underestimated me. If my story proves anything, it's that no one has the right to strip you of your power. In America, too many people stay in toxic relationships out of fear or doubt. But you don't have to. Know your worth. Protect yourself. Gather proof. Be strategic. And when the time comes, don't just walk away, take back everything they tried to steal from you. Because real freedom, it's earned.